While 90s was one of the weirdest periods in Lithuanian history, it's sometimes called not so glorious past or a lost decade. It started right after the fall of Soviet Union. Lithuania had to restart its development, and during this time a series of events happened that resulted in massive surge in crimes, both organized and not. Our police could not deal with criminals. There were various gangs, corrupt cops, corrupt politicians and other things that made this weird transition period last until 2002. Hi, my name is Noeliukas, and I decided to create this video about wild 90s because it's one of the most interesting topics that is made into a books, series, and in Lithuania, to some people it's a means of livelihood. It's a really interesting topic that was never covered in English, to my surprise, until now. And as a person that was born in the 90s, to be exact 91, and I will try to go year by year basis, so that you would get the full scale and magnitude of situation during this period. And also, if you want to see video source like news media of the time, they will be added to the pinned comment down below. I have to say that during those times the broadcasting rules were very lax, and you will see things that would not fly today. They were completely uncensored. So if a person was killed, he was shown in the place he was killed. If they found the body later, it was shown in various stages of decomposition. And for that now, TV studios would get massive penalties for breaching GDPR and other privacy related stuff. But back then, that was normal. And for your own sake, I have to say that you have been warned. Contrary to a popular belief, Lithuania has declared its independence on March 11, 1990. A lot of people think it was 91. It's a common mistake. Same year April, Mikhail Gorbachev issued an ultimatum demanding the repeal of laws passed within 2 days and the restoration of the situation as it was on March 10th, thus revoking our independence. Lithuania's defiance led to the cut-off of all types of oil supplies, an 80% cut of gas supplies, and the stopping of echelons of goods and materials that had already been shipped. It was estimated that in Klaipėda alone, the losses were about 7 to 8 billion rubles. Next year, on January 10th, Mikhail Gorbachev addressed the Parliament of Lithuania, demanding the immediate restoration of the validity of the USSR Constitution and the repeal of all previously adopted unconstitutional acts. The next day, on January 11th, Soviet troops used armored vehicles to seize headquarters of National Defense Department and Press Palace, and the television broadcasting center in Vilnius. People from all over Lithuania gathered in Vilnius for round-the-clock guard duty in front of the parliament, radio and television committee, and television tower. Before midnight on 12th of January, column of tanks, APCs and trucks moved out of the Soviet military base. As the clocks began to strike the first hours of 13th of January, Soviets stormed the television tower and radio and television committee, which was surrounded by unarmed people in human chains. 14 freedom fighters were killed and over 700 injured in these attacks. That night, preparations were also made for possible storming of the parliament building, but the Soviet leadership, after the bloody events, they hesitated to give soldiers such order. The bonfires of the defenders of freedom around the parliament were not extinguished, and as they say, the freedom ain't free. In the same year, the empire of evil collapsed, and 15 new countries appeared on the map. Of course, the good things can't last, and during 91 organized crime groups started to materialize out of thin air and came out of the shadows. Their growth was very rapid because people were very poor and there was big unemployment, so things that make good things happen. Groups like Vilnius Brigade, Doctors, Tulip Street Gang, Princess and others, they were deeply involved in extortion, racketeering, drug trafficking and violent crimes. At their height, from 91 to 93, nearly 100 groups operated in the country. Despite the name, Tulip Street Gang was the one that did the most shocking and cruel crimes, and it has led to a gradual downfall of all other organized crime groups. Some gang names are very funny, like Kamolini, the Ball Gang. When flat earthers started to export their content in Lithuania, it was kinda funny, because you see, in flat earth fantasies, the Ball Gang went international, while in Lithuania they were all arrested. On night of 31st of July, at 2:48 am, huge explosion went off in Sapiega Street in Vilnius. near headquarters of former 42nd Division of USSR Ministry of Internal Affairs. Casualties were avoided, but the building was damaged. At 4 in the morning, Russian MON troops from Delta units sent from Riga killed Lithuanian border guards and police in Medininkai border checkpoint near Belarus border. Russians have arrested these men. They were disarmed and forced to lie down with hands behind their backs, and then they were shot by silenced AK rifles. Out of 8 border guards and police, 6 were killed, 1 died in the hospital, and 1 survived. His name is Tomas Šernas. Because of that, now he is disabled, but he found joy by becoming evangelical reformist priest. The perpetrators fled to Russia to avoid justice and are still being searched today, because Russia refuses to collaborate. And, in Lithuanian memory, this attack left a deep mark. There was also a very controversial event called Privatisation. After restoration of Lithuania's independence, it was decided to create an efficient private sector, replacing unproductive and technologically outdated state-owned enterprises, while at the same time restoring the former owners' property rights to assets nationalized during the occupation. There were 3 main groups of assets that were privatized: state-owned enterprises, the state housing stock, and the assets of collective Soviet farms. According to privatization strategies chosen, the private sector was to become dominant in industry, agriculture, construction, trade, catering, finance, tourism, media, and other commercial services, while the public sector was to continue dominating energy, postal services, passenger and rail transport, health and education, and other social services. And there were 2 phases of privatization. First was privatization with investment vouchers from 91 to 95, and the second was privatization with cash from 96. Privatization is often criticized for being hasty, because most people did not have time to adjust to a changing economic environment and make good use of their investment vouchers and money. And opaque. Privatization process, especially at the beginning, was influenced by state managers of state-owned enterprises and collective farms, bureaucrats, politicians, and the shadow economy, more than regular citizens. A large part of former state assets were privatized far below their market rate, and a relatively small number of rapidly enriched individuals became owners, which led to a significant increase in social inequality and the spread of pejorative term privatisation, from Russian word prihvatit, to make fortune by looting others. On 25th of October 92, a referendum was held to adopt the Constitution of Republic of Lithuania that we use today, and it replaced the Provisional Basic Law adopted on 11th of March 91. It was also the year of serial killers, because they found the overall mess exciting. Angel Face. His real name was Antanas Varnelis. He was called the first serial killer maniac in independent Lithuania. Previously convicted of theft, in 92 he robbed and murdered 6 elderly people. When media reported on his crimes and announced that the killer had not been apprehended, real panic broke out among the people living in remote villages. Television called on people all over Lithuania to help apprehend Varnelis, and in December of 92, the people of Kaunas district succeeded in doing so. He was executed on 28th of September 94. He was only 23 years old. Valentinas Laskys. At the age of 1, as lifeless and neglected child, Valentinas was taken away from his alcoholic mother and hospitalized for exhaustion. Then he was given to an orphanage. His father was serving a sentence for a car accident he caused, and Valentinas has been in juvenile detention since the 5th grade. At the age of 21, he earned his first conviction. After trying to become soldier, Valentinas was declared unfit for military service due to psychopathy. Later, he was convicted 6 times for robberies. At the time he started his killings, he had a 20-year-old disabled daughter, and the most shocking thing is that he killed and robbed people who he knew well, those people who fed and housed him, those people who even asked what he could do to help his disabled daughter, and those who looked after her. He tried to hide in Moldova but was caught in the capital, with 4 confirmed murders and 10 robberies. He stood out from others condemned to death by refusing to ask for pardon, and he did not write a letter to a president. He did not do so because he wanted to be executed as soon as possible, and he was executed in 93 at 40 years old. His daughter received 6 years in prison. In 93, Lithuania re-established its national currency, litas. At first, people did not trust the currency, because during that time, in 3 years, in Lithuania there were already 3 currencies: ruble, animal money, and now litas. So the main currency for larger transactions were dollars, American dollars. And if you wanted to buy a flat, car and other stuff, you had to have dollars.
Jeigu mes kalbame apie naujuosius Vilniaus miesto rajonus, tokius kaip Justiniškės, Pašilaičiai, Fabijoniškės, vieno kambario kaina gali būti nuo 700–800 iki 800–400–500 tūkstančių dolerių. 2 kambarių kainos jau viršė 12 tūkstančių dolerių.
And one of the most lucrative businesses of that time was buying foreign cars that were old from Netherlands or France and other countries and driving them back here and selling them for $200, $400 and more dollars. I recommend watching short documentary called Man of Garūnai, Garūnai Man. It was released in 95 and it lasts about 20 minutes, but it explains many things how that business operated. And during that time, if you make a profit of $400, you were rich, because average person earned less than 100. And during the 90s, the salaries looked like this. And only from 96, 97, people started listing prices in litas, as the currency became more stable.
A kokią valiutą norit keisti?
Dolerius į litus.
Kiek reikia?
20.
Nu tada gali pakeisti, bet naktinių tarifų.
Naktinių?
Po 3.
On 12th of October 93, journalist Vitas Lingys was shot dead with 3 pistol shots outside his home in Vilnius, Stanevičių Street. He was only 33 years old. In 89, together with journalist Vitas Tomkus and Rytis Taraila, Lingys founded the first independent daily newspaper Respublika, The Republic. He was deputy editor-in-chief and wrote and created crime-themed publication. These journalist sites were constantly trained on the Vilnius Brigade, a criminal organization that was on the rampage in the city at the time, and its leaders had declared, without mincing any words, "We run Vilnius. We run the capital." The assassination of the journalist was a fateful turning point for the Vilnius Brigade itself. Within weeks, law enforcement had identified and apprehended the mastermind and the perpetrators of the crime. The trial, which attracted huge public attention, was even broadcast on television. A number of foreign journalists came to cover it, and the mastermind of the assassination, Boris Dekanidze, was the leader of the Vilnius Brigade. He was sentenced to death and executed on 12th of July 95. He was the 7th and the last person to be executed by court order in the independent Lithuania. His case is fundamentally different from all the others. He is the only one of the 7 condemned to death who was not examined by forensic psychiatrists, because there was no doubt about his mental stability. The other 6 were examined, and 4 of them were found to be psychopaths. Igor Akhremov, who fired the shots at the journalist, spent 18 years behind bars, although he was originally sentenced to life. The father of Boris Dekanidze put Herculean effort to stop the execution, bribes, blackmail, and even threatened to blow up the Ignalina atomic power plant. Even with this effort, his son was still executed, and Vilnius Brigade soon ceased to exist. There was also this mutiny of self-defense forces. The crisis has escalated when the government issued an order for volunteers to secure their weapons at designated locations in September, interpreting the order as confiscation of their weapons. A total of about 150 armed men gathered near Ringliškiai. They expressed their mistrust and dissatisfaction with new LDDP government, who was left-leaning, and raised social and political demands. After week-long negotiations, the men agreed to return to their posts if no one could be persecuted for their role in the mutiny. This event escalated into a standoff, ending peacefully. This mutiny of volunteers took place at a very bad time and could have more serious consequences, as Russian army was soon to be withdrawn. And later, in November 94, there was this Withdrawal railway bridge accident, where the bridge bombed under mysterious circumstances and linked to the same group. It disrupted the railway between Vilnius and Kaunas. There were no casualties because of quick reaction by locals, who signaled both trains coming to each other to stop, and successfully it was stopped. In 93, Lithuania decriminalized homosexuality, making consensual sex between men not a criminal offense anymore. This law did not react or affect lesbian women, because this law only was aimed at men. Why? I don't know. But that was Soviet thing. When Lithuania declared its independence, about 5 divisions of occupying Soviet army, about 35,000 soldiers, 1,000 tanks and about 180 aircraft, and about 1,900 APCs were stationed in Lithuania's territory. Soon after declaration, a negotiation process began, which lasted for years. On 17 of January 92, Boris Yeltsin and Vytautas Landsbergis in Moscow signed an agreement on the withdrawal of Russian troops from Lithuania. Referendum was held for the withdrawal of Russian troops from Lithuania. The overwhelming majority of voters were in favor of withdrawal of Russian troops. The last military echelon of the Russian army passed through the railway station of Kena at 23:46 on August 31st, 93. Russians have left for good. Only a few days later, there was a visit of Pope John Paul II. The papal visit served as expression of support for the independence of Lithuania. You may ask, why did criminals did not manage to fully control the country? You see, there was this unit that was formed in 91, an anti-terrorist force. In Lithuania it's called ARAS. It's like SWAT. But from 93, shift happened. We started getting modern equipment, weapons and training. To be an ARAS operative, you have to qualify in a really challenging course, which is really tough, and about 90% of candidates fail. When the stuff gets too hot for police to handle, they are called in. Because of their high standards, collateral damage is as minimal as possible, and they have put many behind bars and a few underground. 94 was the year of financial scams. In the 90s, people were poor, and they jumped at every opportunity to make any money. Lots of scammers have used that, and there was banking crisis of 94. It dealt serious blow to Lithuania's economy and financial system. In that year, there was this Ponzi scheme called Secundas Bank, which offered extremely high interest rates on deposits to the public. It had slogan like, "You need money, we have it," and commercials with 3D animation. On 6th of December 94, this bank collapsed, leaving its investors with a debt over 40 million litas. The bank, which was in operation for about 3 years, was characterized by its extraordinary activity and financial aggressiveness. Between 94 and 96, about 17 banks were liquidated or went bankrupt. By 97, 13 other banks had their operating licenses revoked and were facing bankruptcy proceedings. In Russia, at the same year, 94, there was this pyramid scheme by Sergei Mavrodi called Triple M. It was also a Ponzi scheme that had investors from Lithuania, and it took about $10 billion from all investors, mainly in Russia. And it affected Lithuanians to some extent, but not as much as previously mentioned Secunda Bank. On 26th of April 94, the leaders of Lithuania and Poland, Algirdas Mykolas Brazauskas and Lech Walesa, signed the Treaty of Friendly Relations. This document is a great importance of terms of security, economic and international cooperation, and establishment of strategic partnership between Warsaw and Vilnius. On May 1st, value-added tax, VAT, was introduced and remains one of the most important sources of revenue for the budget. Initially, VAT was introduced at basic rate of 18%, but now it stands at 21%. 95 were the year where the madness has reached its peak. Majority of crimes during the 90s happened then. Also, I should mention that from 91 till 96 there was war in former countries of Yugoslavia, and there was also war in Georgia, now known as Sakartvelo. So because of that, a lot of weapons came flooding in addition to already existing Soviet stock. And one of the examples were machine pistol submachine gun Agram or Agram. While this gun may be considered shoddy by modern standards, criminals liked it for its concealability, and many were assassinated by this gun. But during this year, the most shocking of crimes in Lithuanian history happened. There was this case that reminds movie The Ring, with elements of anime called Oreno Imoto. It happened in reality, but unfortunately, it ended badly for everyone. That happened in small village of Captivity, where everybody knew each other. There was a family. It was second marriage for mother. She had 2 children, Mindaugas and Inga, from the first marriage, and from the second, a daughter named Ruta. Why this case was shocking and had so much of resonance was that it was not a crime that happened to usual suspects. They were not businessmen. They were not politicians, they were not even criminals, they were just an average family. And the main motive for the crime is suggested to be the incestuous relationship between brother and older sister. This case was the most shocking. You see, the victims were average working class family. They had no enemies, no debts, nothing that could lead to their fate. And the son, Mindaugas Daunoras, was a top student of his school and small-time thief, but he easily aced his exams and was supposed to go to Kaunas, University of Technology. But during one night, armed with crowbar and knife, he smashed his stepfather's skull and stabbed his mother. This happened while his parents were sleeping. His sister noticed and started running away, but he caught her and strangled her with a belt. When disposing of the bodies in the drainage well, his younger sister was still alive and she tried to scream for help, but as she lost strength, she drowned there. After finding the bodies, the investigators found that mother had 28 stab wounds and the father had his skull smashed in. After the gruesome execution, he thoroughly cleaned the house, burned the bloody linen, his parents' and sister's clothes, and reglued the wallpaper of one of the bedrooms. He also started pouring concrete to a drainage well so that the stench of bodies did not appear. And for some time, he made up stories that his parents and sister went to Latvia and never returned. After 2 weeks, at the urging of chairwoman of the village community, Daunoras reported the family's disappearance to the police. The whole village felt sorry for Mindaugas. The neighbors helped him with farm work and kept comforting him that his family, who had disappeared, would sometime turn up. For about 40 days he lived with his older sister, and people started noticing the strange behavior. They started acting like newlyweds, and that aroused extreme suspicion. Neighbors soon found inconsistency in his story and remains of burnt clothes. Then police was informed and started investigating. Soon they found drainage well that was full of concrete. The bodies were found.
Ir tik po 40 dienų paieškų pagaliau surasta dingusi Vajagų šeima. Danutė ir Jurgis Vajagai bei jų dukra 11-metė Jurga Vajagaitė. Visi 3 nužudyti. Ir ne Latvijoje, kaip iki šiol tikino ir namuose likęs Vajagienės pirmosios santuokos sūnus Mindaugas Daunoras. Nužudyti čia pat Kupreliškyje nakties metu savo namuose. O vėliau jų lavonai paslėpti prie pat gyvenamojo namo, tik už 1,5 metro nuo virtuvės drenažo šulnyje. Lavonai užpilti cemento, tiksliau uždengti tvirtų betoninių sarkofagų. Dukrai surištos kojos, o tėvų lavonuose durtinės žaizdos. Visas 40 dienų šiame name gyveno, kartais net pamiršdamas dingusius tėvus, Vajaginės pirmosios santuokos sūnus Mindaugas Daunoras. Biržų Saulės gimnazijos abiturientas, tiksliųjų mokslų pirmūnas, prieš savaitę gavęs pranešimą, kad priimtas į Kauno technologijos universitetą. Šiandieną būsimasis studentas sulaikytas. Priminsiu, kad ir kaimynams per pastarąsias savaitės Mindaugas labai jau skirtingai pasakodavo savo motinos, sesers ir patėvio tariamos išvykos į Latviją epizodus.
As a result of this revelation, the attitude of locals shifted from top student who is missing his family to a monster who had to be safeguarded by the police and defended from mob which wanted to tear him to shreds. During time served in prison, punishment for him was changed from execution to life in prison. Lithuania has suspended executions in July of 96 and abolished death penalty entirely at the end of 98. So from then on, criminals with heavy crimes received life sentences.
Taip sunku pasidaro, kad atrodo, kad geriausia būtų sušaudyti ir viskas mirti. Teismas vyko be jokių priekaištų, be nieko. Jokių ten prieštaravimų neturi, kad dėl teismo ko nors.
Baudžiamųjų bylų kolegija Mindaugą Daunorą pripažino kaltu. Jis baudžiamas laisvės atėmimu iki gyvos galvos su turto konfiskavimu. Nuosprendis per 14 dienų gali būti apskųstas Lietuvos apeliaciniam teismui. Po nuosprendžio paskelbimo Mindaugas Daunoras Panoramai sakė:
Aš vertinu nuosprendį teisingai. Ir kad, skaitau, kad čia pati didžiausia bausmė skirta.
Year after the trial, while still in jail, his sister Inga died from leukemia, and he himself hanged in the year of 2000. Both of them were dead at the age of 24. For a year he tried to get into solitary confinement, but was refused until he wrote to a politician from his village, telling her that he needs to study, and he was allowed to be transferred to solitary confinement. In his final letters, he asked to write this message on the gravestone: "Forgive me, Lord, if you can." In 96, the first McDonald's was opened, and jokingly in Lithuania it is called American Embassy. One time at Christmas Eve, 8 bandits thought they had easy protection money collection going on. But the owner of store Lithuania met them with Beretta pistol, which was legally held. 4 of the mobsters were killed, another 4 injured. What was crazy about the situation was that high-ranking mobs were there, and owner had some difficulty living after this case, because of popularity it brought, and some praised him as resistance to mafia schemes, and he was even elected as a Man of the Year, while others tried to equate his acts as being con artist and murderer. Immediately after, his family was placed under state protection. The businessman's children were taken to Germany. Their home was guarded by officers for about 7 years, and the officials kept promising that family could start new life abroad and be settled in the United States or Australia, until they were offered to move, which family declined. Unfortunate thing for him was that his son is a criminal, guilty of trafficking and drug smuggling. Well, this man can catch a break. In 97 they thought they could challenge the authority and think that they are unpunishable. On 31st of January 97, Juras Abramovičius, undercover officer of the State Security Department, got into a car to pick his son from training. At the moment, C mixture left under a vehicle exploded, taking his life, and those who are guilty were never found. He was 37 years old. Bandits always tried to force police to allow them doing their stuff by either bribing or killing police officers. After regaining independence, and at the moment of making of this video, 36 police officers have died in the line of duty. In the official Lithuanian police page you will see that 10 of them died or were killed after 2002, and the rest were lost during the wild 90s. One of those was police expert Sigita Simonaitytė. At the end of 97, she was murdered in Klaipėda.
Miške rastas Klaipėdos vyriausiojo policijos komisariato kriminalinių tyrimų skyriaus ekspertės Sigitos Simonaitytės lavonas. Jauna moteris gangsteriškai nušauta šūviu į kaktą.
She was shot in the head, and before that, the policewoman's neck was broken. She would still have died, but the shot finished her. She was 23 years old. The person who killed her was a criminal she dated, who claimed to be a therapist, and invited her for dinner, from which she did not come back. Of course, there is some irony in the story. After this act, the boss of the killer, Gaidjurgis from Tulip Street gang, decided that this act put too much spotlight on him and the killer needs to go. So in 98, Gaidjurgis asked the killer to come to his birthday. Killer brought his new girlfriend, Ilona Ushkova. She was a 21-year-old woman from Latvia, who had previously given birth in 97, and due to circumstances could not find any other job than escort. By the time the killer asked her to do solid, she had found another man, who was of better boyfriend material. But the boss' birthday is coming, and the killer asked her to come and make him look the part. It's one and done deal. And her decision made her forever 21. And the guys came over. Killer and his girlfriend were beaten and tied and driven to the forest, where both were shot and buried in a ditch. In 2002, the boss made his confession and provided the location. Well, if you think that was bad, 98 was the year when Lithuania was rocked by one of the worst massacres in its recent history. Leonardas Zavistovičius, a resident of village of Draučiai, killed 9 other villagers with hunting rifle and later died in the hospital because of his injuries. He was of Polish nationality and the victims were Lithuanians, so at first there was this thought that it was political crime, politically motivated crime. However, the findings of investigation carried out after the massacre concluded that he was suffering mental illness and had been admitted to psychiatric hospital before, and that this illness was the cause of the massacre. He was just crazy. In 98, Russian economy collapsed. Lithuania at the time was heavily economically intertwined with Russia. Despite its post-Soviet reform trajectory, it affected us heavily, because it was our largest trading partner at that time. Exports to Russia fell up to 60%. It was very bad. Companies that had ruble contracts had their deals made worthless. There was a spike in unemployment. Unemployment rose from 14.7 to 18.8%. This crisis has taught us of the need for diversification, because we could not rely on Russia, and we started moving towards the West. It was only around 2000 that the crisis ended and the country's economic performance returned to pre-crisis levels. There was also this assassination of priest Mikutavičius. His surname is the same as popular singer Marijonas Mikutavičius, known for his song 3 milijonai, which is like an official Lithuanian anthem. This Mikutavičius was a priest, a poet, a collector of art, and he was murdered on 1st July 98. On the evening of June 30th, the priest was lured in the stranger's apartment. There, he was drugged with ether and taken in the trunk of the killer's car to the Nemunas River, where he was disrobed while still alive, wrapped in net and drowned. Criminals stole various art treasures from the priest's apartment, valued at millions of litas, and currently millions of euros. In September of 2000, Beleckas was sentenced to life imprisonment for organizing his murder and theft of his art collection. Some of the valuable property taken from the priest was later found. For example, it turned out that the sculpture, The Risen Christ, from the priest collection had been attempted to be taken out of Lithuania by businessmen of controversial reputation, Juozas Edvardas Petraitis. And currently, some of the works of art that are known to be in this collection are still being searched by Interpol and other organizations. In August 30, Me-2 passenger helicopter crashed into Lake Plateliai. On that day, businessman Saulius Rakauskas was celebrating his wedding at Plateliai Lake. The helicopter had been rented for the guests' entertainment. The helicopter was supposed to make 6 flights. The last flight was for the newlyweds to take off, but on the 5th flight it unexpectedly started to fall down. All 11 passengers died, including brides and groom's mothers and Rakauska's sister. At the moment of this video, it is the worst air catastrophe that happened in Lithuania.
Labas vakaras, trumpam nutraukėme krepšinio varžybų transliacijas, kadangi mus pasiekė žinia. Kraupus įvykis šį vakarą sudrebino nusikaltimais garsėjantį Panevėžio miestą. Šį kartą nusikaltėliai pasikėsino į pareigūnus. Apie 7:30 vakaro nušautas Panevėžio apygardos prokuratūros organizuotų nusikaltimų ir korupcijos tyrimo skyriaus vyriausiasis prokuroras Gintautas Reika. Prie Panevėžio Mackevičiaus gatvės 21 namo gyventojai išgirdo šūvių garsus. Po kiek laiko šio organizuotų nusikaltimų ir korupcijos tyrimo skyriaus vyriausiojo prokuroro žmona, priejusi prie jo asmeninio automobilio Nissan ir atidariusi duris su išdaužtu stiklu, pamatė kraujo klane nužudytą savo vyrą. Panevėžio organizuotų nusikaltimų ir korupcijos tyrimo skyriaus vyriausiajam prokurorui buvo 32. Našlaičiais liko 3 vaikai, tarp kurių vyriausiai dukreliai te buvo 6 metai. Gintautas Reika garsėjo kaip itin sąžiningas pareigūnas, tyręs visas pagrindinės su Panevėžio mafija susijusias bylas. Jis pirmasis Lietuvoje pritaikė užkardymo įstatymą. Manoma, kad Panevėžio ONTT vyriausiąjį prokurorą nušovė profesionalų žudikai.
In 1999, attacks by criminals on law enforcement were almost daily occurrence. Officers' cars and police stations were blown up, and their homes set on fire. On 25th of January, however, the line was crossed when the body of Panevėžys prosecutor Gintautas Sereika was riddled with 7 bullets. He was the first high-ranking law enforcement officer whose life was taken by criminals. Fear gripped the whole of Lithuania as gangs seemed to be triumphing and taking control of the country into their own hands. However, that was just the beginning of an end for killers of Tulip Street gang. Because you see, for them, the biggest mistake was the killing of Kiesas family and their driver. Gediminas Kiesas was a businessman, former Mažeikiai oil owner. His son Valdas was studying in the UK and came back to visit his father. They were driven by longtime driver Alfonsas, and while they went home from Vilnius en road, they were stopped by criminals, dressed as police officers. They were actually members of Tulip Street gang, and this case confirmed their reputation for being the cruelest gangs in Lithuania. They took would-be victims to a farmhouse in Panevėžys region, where they demanded bank cards and codes by threatening to kill them. Later, the driver was strangled, and Gediminas and his son were shot and buried in a ditch. Their bodies were beheaded because criminals thought that they would not be recognized without their heads. So the forensic had to use DNA testing to confirm their identities. Meanwhile, money was withdrawn from ATMs in Riga and Warsaw. Millions of euros, dollars and litas were expected to be made, but each perpetrator only received 9,000 litas. In total, sum was about 133,000 litas. That's less than $50,000. Their bodies were only found in November of 2001, about 1.5 years after the killing. It caused wide resonance in society for its cruelty. Perpetrators were soon found, and now they serve multiple life sentences. Remigijus Daškevičius, also known as Daške, was a former president of Lithuanian Boxing Federation, leader of Kaunas criminal gang Daškiniai, basically men of Daške. His gang was known for racketeering and smuggling, but later in his life he tried to take legal path, was a construction manager, president of Boxing Federation. He has been active supporter of boxers, contributing to sporting events and even patronizing some of them personally. It is said that even famous athletes, including Arvydas Sabonis, have paid tribute for his support. He also supported charity events and helped orphanages and promoted social projects. That being said, criminal past has caught with him, and he was killed with a single shot to the heart by a professional sniper on November 24, 2001, just after leaving Vilnius restaurant St. Valentino on Trakai Street. Nobody knows who did it, and it was never found, but it caused massive resonance, because it was like a public execution. It happened in a known place, surrounded by people. Killing was very professional. It was done with silenced rifle and a single shot. It was like warning what happens to those who try to legalize. He had 2 sons. Both of them are musicians now, and one of them is very famous. His music, in my opinion, is shit. But there are people who taste that here, so who am I to judge? I want to end this video on a positive note. There was this one thing that started in Lithuania and then was copied and exported to other countries. Miss Captivity pageant. Producers thought of a joke. In Lithuania we have one all-female prison, correctional facility. Why not make a beauty contest? Surprise, surprise, it was a smash hit. It was initiated and organized by TV channel LNK together with well-known producer Arūnas Valinskas. The aim was to portray the everyday life of prison through different lenses, to show the prisoners as women with dreams, talents and desires, to create beautiful memories even behind bars. The winner of this pageant, Kristina, 22 years old at the time, received silver crown and a prize of 4,000 Lithuanian litas, about $1,000. The funds were kept in bank account which she received after release. She was released the following year with 2-year-old daughter, who had been in prison with her mother since birth, and she has successfully reintegrated into society and now lives in the same city as me, making craft works. Unfortunately, the winner of 2nd place did not manage to reintegrate and had to go to prison multiple times. During that year, our law enforcement came to a breakthrough. All major organized criminal groups were either decapitated, arrested, sentenced for life, or some liquidated in their entirety. At the end of the day, the question is often raised: was the freedom worth it? And to that, the answer is yes. Yes, we had our growing pains. We had to build everything from zero. We did many mistakes, but in the end, Lithuanians understood that we need no gods and no masters, just people, standing up, falling down, and standing up again. The zeros were a time of stabilization. Situation started improving slowly at first, then after joining the European Union, it improved massively. Then came boom of internet and technology, which accelerated the growth, and now it's crazy to see how far we have come and the lessons we have learned in this period. The streets became safer and our economy became stable. Crime is at all-time low, but will it last? That is the question for the future.